Rim true like a night out. Yeah.
You better,
Welcome.
you better say that
I
now.
was like, hey, you have a celebrity at the table. You gotta tell Bryn right. Excellent, by the way. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Not now. Where's
Yeah,
my
Bryn-
thing?
Thumbs up over. Yeah.
Okay, it is, do we have a timer guy?
Matt?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see if it's ready to go. Yeah. I just. That's okay.
No.
You did a great job. Thank you. Your skills just keep abounding. Thank you. I don't know if
Okay.
we're on or we're not. I can't
Yes.
tell. Okay. Well, it is 7:14. And I would like to welcome everyone to this regular meeting of the Oklamas Board of Education held in public for the purpose of conducting the business of the school board. There will be two opportunities for public comment tonight. Citizens who wish to address agenda or non-agenda items will have an opportunity at the beginning of the meeting as well as near the end of the meeting. In-person individuals who wish to address the board must complete a blue form located with the agendas near the room entrance and present it to the board secretary prior to the start of the agenda item. Virtual participants must submit their name and address in a message through the chat box located in Zoom's meeting controls prior to the start of the agenda item. At the appropriate point in the agenda, the board president will call upon individuals who have submitted a blue card or a chat message, and that individual's microphone will be unmuted for their comments. First up tonight, we have a presentation regarding our E3 grant with some updates for us. Dr. Slee.
Okay,
Why did that change?
here are our E3 folks, Kelly and Shelby from Child and Family Charities, and they will tell you all about the great things that are happening at the E3 clinic at the high school.
That's okay. That's okay.
Like, this is not
They
the
just
right
let
number.
anyone in here, don't they? So my name is Kelly Haney. I'm the Director of Program Innovations at Child and Family Charities. And we are here tonight to talk about E3, like you heard, and E3 stands for Enhancing and Expanding Emotional Health. And this program is funded through MDHHS, and part of the grant requires us to present in front of the board every year. And we have to present on the location of the clinic, the services provided, and then the use of minor consent, which I will go into further detail in a minute. So like Dr. Slee mentioned, the clinic is located at Okemos High School. We have a therapist there, Sana Sumbal. This is her third year going into this clinic. She is a limited license. She has her MSW, Masters in Social Work. The clinic offers mental health services to students of Okemos Public Schools. We do have a focus on high school students because the clinic is actually located there at the high school, but she can see any Okemos Public School student ages 5 to 21. If the student is in elementary school or middle school, then they offer after school sessions or hours for those students. And then the kids who are at the high school, they try very hard to pull them out of like an elective class or maybe do sessions during lunch as to not disrupt those core classes. The clinic is, it does take minor consent. So minor consent means that any student ages 14 or older can consent to their own mental health services. It's a Michigan law. But it's on a limited basis. They can only meet for up to 12 sessions or 4 months, whichever occurs first. And the therapist does try to work with the student to identify what barriers are preventing them from letting the parents know about the services. We really do encourage parental involvement as much as possible. And if the student does need to meet or want to meet after those 12 sessions or 4 months is up, then we have to get parental consent in order to continue services. Last year, Sana met with 43 students. The grant, expectation is 50 students a year. So she's right there at about 50 students. She did offer like a psychoeducation group, like a social connection group, I guess, during lunchtime. That a couple of students did attend, and then all of the rest of her sessions were individual sessions. She had just over 500 sessions that she conducted last year. And we do give client satisfaction surveys to all of the clients, and of all of them that were surveyed, I think there were 2 that either would not recommend or had a neutral response to recommending the service to their classmates. Oh my God, and I completely skipped over Shelby. I usually have a PowerPoint, but Shelby is actually an addition to our E3 services this year. So she's a case manager that can provide some additional support to the families, and I will let her tell you what she does.
Yeah, so my role as a case manager, I'm able to step in to alleviate some stress from the therapist to kind of help our clients get needs that they might not be having met otherwise. So that can look like a lot of different things. Right now, I have some clients I'm helping find jobs, some clients who need help getting insurance. It can be a wide variety of things, but it's just another support for these students to make sure that they don't fall through the cracks and receive the resources that they need.
That is great.
Yes, trustee Kavanaugh.
What did you do for the summer? Are the kids able to
Yeah.
continue?
Yep, so it is a year-round service. So in the summer, we work with the school to either, if there's staff in the school, then the therapist can continue services there at the school. But if the building's closed for some reason, then they can do services at the main agency, which we're just at Jolly and Dunkel down the road from the high school. Or they'll do telehealth services.
great.
Yep.
Yes, trustee
Yes,
Buckle.
go ahead.
Thank you for that overview. So really helpful. Do you know how many of the 42 students went past the 12 and had parental consent to go past the 12?
So of those 43 students, not all of them were minor consent. Actually, most of them are parental consent. She usually has about 1 or 2 minors, maybe on her caseload at a time, that are using that minor consent. So it's a very small amount that actually utilize the minor consent.
Whether it's before 12 sessions or not.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I do want to mention that we do bill insurances. I forgot to mention that part. So in order to help sustain the clinic, we do bill insurance companies. If insurance is a barrier, though, we do not provide services. We will still provide services. We'll have, Shelby work with the parents if it's a lack of insurance. If they're struggling with co-pays or deductibles, then we will waive those. We don't send them to collections or anything like that. We'll waive the fees.
Yes, trustee Taylor.
Thank you for the overview. I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
I believe this is the third.
It
year
is.
That we've done this.
Yeah.
And with the current caseload at about 43, where is that from like a trend standpoint?
Sure.
Is it pretty typical? Are we higher, lower than we've been in the last couple of years?
Yeah, so the 43 is just unduplicated users. And that's about average. We have clinics in Hull and Waverly also, and they're seeing right around the 50 mark of unduplicated users. But the therapists themselves usually carry a caseload of like 18 to 20. So they don't have, 45 students on their caseload at once. But yeah, that's pretty average.
Okay. And then, can you refresh my memory? I know we talked about this before, but I just want for myself and also for the community.
Sure.
Is there a referral, like the
Oh, yeah.
staff refer students? Of course, I'm sure students can also self-refer and self-sign up. And then what can we do if the grant itself is really looking for us to get to that 50 number? We really aren't quite there yet.
Sure.
I mean, we're still helping. I love that there's 43 students that are
Yeah.
getting the support. What can we do to get that to 50?
Yeah, those are good questions. So I mean, to get to 50, I think it's really just getting the word out. I've worked with Sana a lot about how we're communicating the clinic to the students and to the families. So Sana and I actually attended, do you remember what it was called, Laura? Was it the kickoff? We attended something right before school. It was like maybe the freshman orientation, a lot of parents, a lot of students. I think it was Kickstart, yes. Where we shared the clinic and the services with the students and the parents. And one thing that, so Sana is of Pakistani descent. So she knows the Middle Eastern culture and can really relate to them. And one thing she shared with me is that, you know, in her culture, clinic means medical, it means doctor, it means medication. So we've worked with actually your communications department to figure out a way to better market the clinic, if you will. We've changed the name of it to Student Support Services so that maybe students have a better understanding of what these services are. And we've also talked a lot about how the therapists can help with just like test anxiety or just the stress of school or sports. And it's not, you know, a student that has this big traumatic event that sees the therapist, that, you know, she's there to help really anybody. Yeah.
Just to pick up on Trustee Taylor's question though, like
Sure.
for the referrals, is it mostly self-referrals or is it
Yes.
mostly teacher referrals or how do
Yeah.
students actually wind up at the student support services?
It's a combination. I think at Okemos, a lot of them are self-referred, or parent referrals, but teachers can refer, student counselors. I know Sana works closely with the student counselors, to get referrals through there. We do have flyers through the school that have a QR code, so students can just scan it with their phone and they can fill out their own referral if they want. So yeah, various ways, but anybody can refer.
Well, you mentioned medication, and then just for our community, can you help us understand, is medication involved, or is she able to prescribe medications? Just to clear that up.
Yeah, so she cannot prescribe any medication. In kind of along the same lines of that, she also can't do any family planning on here. So there's no talk about birth control or anything like that. And then she's a licensed therapist, so she has no ability to prescribe any medication at all. We do have a psychiatric nurse practitioner at the agency. And so if a student is exploring medication, she can send a referral to the psychiatric nurse practitioner, but that has to go through the parent. That is not a minor consent thing. A minor cannot consent to the medication. The parent definitely has to be involved in
Great,
that
thank you.
situation.
I appreciate making that very clear.
Yes,
Thanks.
yes.
Anyone else? Thank you so much.
You're
We
welcome.
appreciate all the work.
Yes,
um,
absolutely.
To support the kids.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, we have a discussion move forward regarding the Kinawa remediation. We'll hear from Director Lieber on an update.
What the?
Like, yeah, man.
Better her than me.
Kidding.
Whoa. That's pretty cool.
No.
Like Alice in Wonderland kind of thing. She's trying. She's working right now.
Hey, that's not.
It's pretty picture.
Here we go.
All right.
Okay, thank you all for your patience.
You got it.
So, Director Lieber has been, working with a team at Kenua for a remediation plan. So he wanted to, bring the board up to speed on the root cause, the process that's been undertaken, an estimated timeline, and some estimated costs as well.
Thank you. You go back to the first one. So we're gonna talk real quick about the root cause, basically how we got here, the process, how we prevent it from happening again, and then of course the estimated costs, which is my least favorite part to talk about on this one. Okay. I gotta follow along with you, otherwise I won't be able to. I don't wanna keep looking behind me. So the root causes. There's really two issues with Kenua. We have a clear moisture problem, but we also have an HVAC problem. The moisture on its own wouldn't be an issue if the HVAC system was doing its job in removing that moisture. So when you run your air conditioning at home in the summer, you're trying to get the air down into the mid to low fifties as it goes through in most people's homes in Michigan. It's like your furnace, and then you have like an AC coil called an evaporator coil on top. And the whole point is you're trying to get the air cold, but you're also trying to get it to release the moisture. So if you can get the air going through there down to about 55 degrees, you'll get condensation, which is what you want. That's the moisture leaving the air and trickling out the little drain into the floor of your basement. At Kenua, that was not working correctly. Basically, the temperatures we were getting were in the high 60s, so it was enough to make you feel cool, but not enough to get rid of the moisture. We addressed that problem simply. We went in there, we brought an engineer from training, we figured out real quick that we weren't getting the temperatures cold enough to get rid of the moisture. We uncovered that at some point in the programming, someone had changed the way the system was operating. The system has more than enough capacity to do the job, but in order for it to work properly, you have to run 2 circulation pumps and not 1. That's a little technical, but as soon as we turned on 2 pumps, temperatures plummeted. We went down into the basement, we looked at the air handlers in the basement. We were seeing no water coming out at all. About 2 hours after turning on the second pump, watching those temperatures come down, it was coming out like a fire hose. These units, these air handler units, equivalent to the furnace you have at home, are huge. Just absolute buckets and buckets. So clearly that was part of our issue. Also, we discovered that some air handlers in the building were not on at all. A couple were not working, a couple were just switched off. Which was also a problem because it was limiting our airflow and our ability to deal with the problem overall. So the sources of moisture, Kenua was built without a vapor barrier. That is not a big deal necessarily. Back when Kenua was built, it was all hard floors. There was no carpet. They weren't necessarily worried about moisture coming up through the floor. We've since added carpet. 20, 30 years ago, when I was at Kenua, there was no carpet. Carpet was added later. So any moisture coming up through the floor isn't just getting on a hard floor, it's getting into the carpet, which is a problem. We had a leaky basement that was fixed last summer. Water was coming in the foundation under the 200 wing. There is a basement. There was a lot of water coming in. We've addressed that problem. Kenua has a pool. I don't know if anyone remembers the pool. Katie, you probably remember the pool. You remember the bathing suits?
I remember the school issue.
I can confirm those are gone. They can't hurt us anymore. The pool is not necessarily an issue. It still has water in it. It has water in it because this gets weird, but if you take the water out, the water table at Kenua is so high, it actually touches the bottom of the pool. And in the spring, when you get the snow melt, the water level can come up in the ground to the point where it would push the pool right out of the ground. Personally, I want to try it. I think it would be fun to watch. But there's still chlorinated water in there. So since we have this big source of moisture down there in the pool, the air handlers in that space need to run. They haven't run in years. I don't know why they were programmed off, but basically if you have a pool, that moisture is always going to be higher in the air in that space, and it's going to try to get out into the rest of the building. So we want to run those air handlers because the system is designed to pull this makes sense, negative pressure on the building. So we're not exhausting air from the pool into the school. We're pulling air from the building into the pool and then out through the roof. That keeps the chlorine smell out of the school. That keeps the moisture out of the school. So if those air handlers aren't running, that moisture is just leaching out into the school, contributing to the problem. Summer cleaning was also a problem. We clean Kenowa last. Stacy has most of her summer school programs there, so we don't get there till the very end, and it's usually when it's the hottest and it's the most humid, and when we put water into those carpets to clean them, we rely heavily on the HVAC system to help us dry the carpets, and if it's not working properly, that moisture never leaves. And then lastly, humans, you know, breathing, sweating, that sort of thing. You add all these things up and then take away the air conditioning system's ability to remove that moisture. Basically, any moisture that ever gets released into that building just was never leaving. It was there forever. We were seeing humidity levels in the upper 70s, even low 80s. Currently today, they're in the low 40s, which is where we want to be. Because of that problem though, the objects, they don't dry out as fast. The air is dry, which is great, but all the objects, the desk, the carpet, the ceiling tiles, everything in the space will also suck up that moisture. And the only way to get that moisture out is to surround it with dry air, and it takes a very long time. So even though the air is dry, it's going to take months, if not maybe even a year, for some items to dry out to the point where they're not capable of growing mold. We're seeing surface mold on those surfaces even still because it's still moist. Does that make sense? Everybody follow? Okay, next one. So ERG, who we all know from past experiences, came up with a plan. They want us to replace all the ceiling tiles. Ceiling tiles will hold moisture. The ceiling tiles at Kenowa are all bowed, which is a sign that they have been wet for a long time. So they want those replaced. Number one, they're holding moisture. Number two, they can grow mold. They want us to clean all the surfaces. Basically, we're wiping them clean. If you go into a space, I only say this because I've heard this question like 10 times from people now. If you walk into a space, you might still see remnants of what looks like mold, but it has been killed. We're wiping it down. We're trying to remove it, but you can't always remove it, but we know we are killing it. We're using the appropriate chemicals to do that. We're also vacuuming with the HEPA vac. So certain items like books, things like that, we're vacuuming all the mold off it we can and running it through a HEPA filter. While the cleaning is going on, all the air in the room is being circulated through HEPA air scrubbers, which is just a giant box with a big fan in it and a big HEPA filter in it. So as everyone's in there cleaning, moving around, any mold that gets stirred up and put into the air gets sucked up by that thing and consumed. Also along the way, if ERG feels it's necessary, they'll do some air testing just to make sure we're on the right track in that space and there's not a problem, and we haven't had any positive hits yet. We're trying to stay below what we find outside. Naturally, there's always mold everywhere around you. So far, we've been below what's outside, which is great news. And then lastly, all the carpet. Old carpet, the older it is, the worse it is. That carpet in Kenowa has to be at least 15 or 20 years old. I have no idea when it was put in. It's an issue. We've looked at it for New Chippewa. We're using different products now. The products that are going in will have the appearance of carpet. It's not really carpet like we know, like we have in here. It's a synthetic material. It's designed to allow a lot of air flow through it. So we don't expect to have this issue in those schools, but also making sure we replace these products like the carpets and anything porous that can grow mold needs to be replaced. Everything has a shelf life. If you hang on to old things, you just make your problems worse down the road. Next one. So, oops. The building is safe for staff and students. That will remain that way as long as we're not seeing the mold on the surfaces release into the air. So far, we haven't had any indication that that's happening. ERG is testing along the way to make sure we're fine. We could detect it in isolated areas and have to address it. We may not detect anything the whole time. That's the desired outcome. There's no way to know for sure. The first phase began a few months ago. It's 54 rooms. So basically it's the majority of the classrooms and any other space where students are on a regular basis. We've done 9 rooms so far. We have 45 to go. That seems slow, but the first few batches of 4, we're doing 4 rooms at a time. Took a little bit of tinkering just to kind of get the process right. Also, we had to work with the staff to figure out how to swap them to other spaces and how to do that efficiently. We expect this to go faster and faster. Also, as we work further down our list, there are a lot of rooms on the tail end of the project that don't have carpet at all. Those will go a lot faster. We're anticipating late winter, early spring. The only thing that could really change that is if we find some other variable we weren't looking for, or who knows. Second phase, office areas. The main office areas, there's some offices in behind the library, things like that. We haven't fully assessed those spaces yet. However, they're a lot smaller. They won't disrupt the normal class flow, so it should be a little easier to do those spaces. And then third phase, the gym areas, auditorium, the cafeteria, storage spaces, and mechanical spaces. We haven't really assessed those at all yet. The gym, as you can imagine, is a huge space, but there's also not a lot of materials in there that we would be particularly worried about. Auditorium is one we still have to assess. We haven't done that yet. We're still on the assessment phase now, going into the 300 wing, starting at the 100 wing, and we will get to these spaces hopefully by December. At least that's the goal. Prevention. So the HVAC system at Kenowa is basically original. There are some components that have been replaced, but a lot of the sensors in the system that allow us to remotely see what's going on no longer work. I can go on my laptop right now and see the system and see what it's doing, but it gives you bad information. We need to get those updated. We're working on doing that with Train right now. Improved maintenance. Over the last 60-ish years, not a lot's been done to that system. The systems are designed to last, for the most part, the life of the building. It's more the electronic side and the control side where there haven't been a lot of updates where we really need them. Without them, it's really hard for us to not only control the system, but see what it's doing. It could tell us one thing when it's doing something totally different. Train knows this system well. It's not necessarily one of their systems, but they've been working on it for us for decades, and they're working on a plan to try to figure out how we can get better control of it. This building has a 6-year lifespan. We know that. We're not looking to do anything crazy. We're just trying to make sure that we can operate the building properly. The sources of moisture, the summer cleaning schedule is going to change. We're not going to do carpets in the summer. We're going to figure out how to do it in the colder months of winter. That's going to be a challenge. We haven't really gone down this road yet, but we will. It's not going to be fun for operations, but we will figure out a way to do it. Continue monitoring and repairing any building leaks. This could be anything from a new roof leak to the foundation leaking again, to any sources of moisture. We just need to be on the lookout for those and make sure we deal with it. Kenowa is actually in very good shape structurally as a building. It does not have any active roof leaks that I'm aware of. We've scoured all over looking for them. I don't anticipate that being a problem, but we need to make sure we have a system in place just to make sure. The flooring, again, having an active replacement plan for the flooring. It's not just about mold, it's also about allergens, things like that. Carpet it has benefits, but it's also pain. It can grow mold. It's very hard to clean. It's very problematic for us. We need to figure out solutions, and I think we have a good one for the new Chippewa. So we went through 4 rooms. We changed the process a little bit based on what we learned. When we did the first 4 rooms, we actually removed the carpet, the tile floor underneath the carpet, and installed a vapor barrier. The flooring underneath the carpet is asbestos tile. We have tons of it. It's in lots of schools, lots of buildings. It's not a big deal. But we removed it so that we can install a vapor barrier. Doing that added a whole nother week. We're not sure it actually did us any benefit, and just the cost and the time in removing the tile itself seemed counterproductive. Our goal is to keep moving through the building and get as much of the surface mold as we can. And if we're spending a week just to do the floor, that's another week it takes us to get on to the next batch. The flooring that's going in will not be affected. It's just a hard laminate flooring. It won't be affected by any moisture coming up through the floor. And we know, that building operated for at least 30 years before it had carpet in it without a vapor barrier, and it was never a problem. So not terribly worried about it, but we did that to make sure that we could keep moving quickly. So the cleaning is 800,000. That's our high end estimate. First batch of rooms, everybody was trying to figure out the process. It was probably more expensive than we thought it was going to be and more expensive than the contractor thought it was going to be. But we really honed in the process to try to keep the costs under control, but most importantly, achieve the goal we wanted. Environmental testing, that is a very high estimate too, and it's high just so we have the room to do whatever testing we feel like we need to do along the way, just to be sure that what we're doing is working and the building remains safe for everyone involved. HVAC assessment and repair. So that building has 16 air handlers in it, and we need to get control over those. Once we get the sensors fixed and the controls tweaked so they work properly, downstream in all the classrooms, they have these little boxes in the ceiling and they just open and close to let hot or cold air in. That's it. We don't know how many of those are working or not working. It's not critical to the function of the building. There's so much air moving through the building that if one classroom maybe wasn't operating correctly, it's not the end of the world. But we still need to do an assessment and make sure that we don't have some huge problem there. And unless we fix the air handlers, it's really hard to diagnose anything downstream. But so we'll look into that as well. That could be something we end up doing in maybe just a few rooms. Maybe we do it in no rooms. It just really depends on how or what we find. Carpet, ceiling tile, materials, 450,000. That went down a lot. Basically because we changed the plan. We took out the vapor barrier part of the project. As we move on, like I said, it will go faster because there are a lot of spaces that don't have carpet, which is phenomenal. It just makes this process way faster. And it just goes to show how problematic carpet is. Funding sources, Liz, I'll let you cover that.
Just like to remind the board and inform the community of what is allowed in a bond or a sinking fund, and maintenance items are not allowed in those items. And so when we think about cleaning, mold testing, those types of things are not excuse me, allowed in a sinking fund or bond. Those things would have to be paid for under our general fund dollars. We are looking at what might need to be done with the HVAC system, as Director Lieber had shared. We don't exactly have a final idea of what has to be done, but if it's maintenance type of items, that would not be allowed. Not saying it doesn't have to be done, but those would not be allowed under a bond or sinking fund. But if we have to repair them, we can. So it's going to be a little, once we know more about those systems and what has to be done, then we can make a final determination. But I do know that the cleaning and testing, mold specific testing is not allowed in those items because that is considered maintenance. Carpet, ceiling tiles, we can put carpet and ceiling tiles in a sinking fund or in a bond, so we can put those in one of the funding sources. And the last bit, my Assistant Superintendent Bailey or Director Lieber, but we are still planning to utilize that building after 6 years is up, after what the Kenowa students move into the new Kenowa building. It has been the intent that we continue to utilize that building and move a lot of district functions over to that building, such as central administration, technology, operations, and utilizing that space over in that building. So while this is a lot of money, we expect to continue to use that building for many, many more years.
Sure.
I know that I saw the phases, but what's the timeline that's associated with that?
We've only really planned out the first phase of 54. ERG, the process starts with ERG. They kind of go into each space and try to figure out how good or bad is the situation in this room, what materials are there, what is going to need to be addressed by GFL, who is the cleaning team, specifically. And the scope of work is always changing based on what they're finding. So we're confident we'll be done with that part late winter, early spring. And then moving on to the next part, we don't know for sure until we fully assess those areas. They could be very clean. There might not be anything to do there. It might not be, and that'll change things as well. We do think the office areas though, which is the second phase, is gonna go very quick. It's not gonna be as difficult to move things and people around. We lose little bits of time just trying to work around school. We have 4 rooms to move 4 rooms 2 at a time. And just the process of, taking all the staff members' stuff and moving it over here and setting them up so they can go and then moving it all back. And then somewhere during that process, we have to clean all that stuff too. That adds a couple of days of time each time. Ideally, we finish a block of rooms late in the week so the teacher then can have the weekend to do that. That hasn't always worked out. And we just lose little bits of time here and there. Once we get past this first stage though, I think it will go much faster. And we'll also assess too, if all the items are drying out, we get into spring and the winter's been real cold, so the heat's running like crazy and everything's just drying out. We're not having any issues. The ERG might change the recommendation and maybe we're not doing nearly as much. The carpet though's gotta go, but that'll be done mostly with the classrooms. Really, other than the classrooms, there's not much carpet left other than offices, so.
And
that'll
when
happen no matter
when
what.
we think about the schedule, as you heard, four getting done, it's 4 teachers, that are setting up a new learning space for their students. And so I just want to give, kudos to the whole team. It is a massive coordination. Our teachers, our staff, our students have been amazing. As Director Lieber said, we're trying to make this as efficient and timely as possible, but wanting to make sure that students and staff are still involved in the process and know the end result. So I know Director Lieber has been meeting with Principal Sturley and meeting with staff so that they're aware of what's happening with this process as we're trying to move quickly to get the moisture out, but also make sure that we're maintaining that learning environment for our staff and students as well.
Yes, trustee Phelps.
So I guess I just want to, acknowledge that the cost is significant, especially in terms of general fund dollars. So I guess my question relates to the future. Maybe address kind of what we're doing so we don't have to do this again. Certainly, we don't want to spend $1 million general fund every year. to clean up
Correct.
buildings.
So one of the projects I've been working on since I've started is based around just the replacement cycle of items. It's a very daunting thing though, as you go through it and you start to apply it to the real world. We're living here in Okemos. Most of the items we have in our schools are either past their expected life or way past their expected life. So there's going to be a financial challenge to figure out in the future of how do we catch up. The new schools, fortunately, they're not built in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, right? We'll know exactly what products are in there. A lot of them will be under warranty. A lot of them will have service plans associated with them. And there's a much better, we're not going to have anything in that building that someone else doesn't have. So it's easy for us to compare. When you talk about Central being this old, there's generations of different pieces of equipment in this building, and just trying to figure out how the heating system works sometimes takes a week of just following pipes around. In this new building, we'll have a much better understanding. Veritas and Crispin are going to provide us with all the information on every product we have. I'm not worried about that. That'll be easy. It's catching up on the older buildings. That's challenging. I mean, you talk about the high school Bennett Woods and Hiawatha. These are buildings that are between 30 and 40 years old. Think about your house. When your house is 30, 40 years old, your kitchen's worn down, or you've probably already replaced it once. Your bathrooms are worn out, your floors are worn out. That's kind of the place where we are right now with these schools. So trying to figure out over the next 5 to 10 years, how we bring them back up and fix these things is going to be a challenge for sure.
Yeah, I would agree. But it seems like worth the challenge, is
Sure.
what I would say, just because this is
Yeah.
not something we want to do every year, so.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to remind the board, we have done a facilities assessment before the 2022 bond. And, we are looking at, and that was part of this bond, is to what are the facility needs that we have besides these big buildings? Where is the greatest need so we can start chipping off on a list? There is gonna need, more money than we have in the current bond, obviously, but that is something that, we have actively started, been reviewing.
I'll add to that, every counterpart I've talked to that has the same job as me somewhere else has the exact same problem. It's not exclusive to us. It's just, we got to wrap our heads around what our issues are, document them, and come up with a plan. So I don't think we're any better or any worse than anyone else. It's just, what do we want? What do we want to do? So.
Trustee Lynn.
Just really quickly, I'm glad to hear that we have plans to make sure that we are going to document and manage our assets. Asset management is important. So I appreciate the fact that we have our hand, we're thinking in terms of that. But in terms of the impact to the general fund, did we have some portion of the budget allocated? I mean, what should we look for, or, how should we prepare the community to digest this $1 million impact from a budget standpoint?
So this would be one of those items as we give examples of why do you have a fund balance? This is exactly why, for unplanned emergencies. We did not know about this when we worked on our budget for the upcoming school year, the 24-25 school year. So there will be a budget revision of approximately that dollar amount, unless things change in the next month or so. But that will directly come out of basically our fund balance. And that is why we have to have a fund balance that is sustainable for these types of situations.
Yes.
One last, sorry, real
This is
quick one.
past your limit.
I know.
Kareem.
Just with the testing, you said that ERG has done some testing, and is that something that if my child was at Kenowa, I would have gotten the results, or can our community go to a certain place and find the results, or?
Yeah, anytime we do any testing, it ends up on the website, the same way we did it with OPM. So there's all the testing we've done, I think to date, there was a recent one that might not be yet, but it all ends up there. So if anyone had any questions, they can go there. So, and so far all the testing has been very positive. So.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Okay, thank you
Okay.
so much. All right, up next is our citizens address. At this time in the meeting, citizens have an opportunity to address the board regarding items of interest that may or may not be a part of the evening's agenda. Citizens are required to limit comments to 3 minutes, except when this requirement is waived by the board president during the meeting. A designated timekeeper will communicate to the individual who is addressing the board at 3 minutes. The board highly values public comment and input. However, the board meeting format is designed to facilitate the evening's agenda and therefore restricts board members from engaging in conversation with speakers or immediately responding to questions. Questions and concerns may be addressed by the board later in the agenda and may be assigned for follow-up by the board or superintendent at a later date. Do we have any blue cards?
Yeah.
Do we have any online speakers? No, we do not. Okay. Then we will move on to our superintendent's report. And tonight we have Assistant Superintendent Bailey.
Yes, yes. So I guess I'll start off with, as you know, and our community knows, this past week, the district experienced the tragic loss of one of our high school students. We want to extend our heartfelt condolences to the family, the friends, and our Okemos staff during this difficult time. We, as a district, remain committed to supporting our school community through this period of grief and healing. And we've implemented several different support measures to support our students and our staff through this time. So I just wanted to share a few examples. At our high school, we had grief counselors and mental health professionals that were available for anyone that needed additional support. We're working with Ellie's Place to have some grief counseling sessions available for our students with the experts in that area. We've had the Wolfpack have a presence at the high school and throughout the district for much needed comfort. And then we have shared resources for emotional support with our families. And we know that the last few days have been difficult on everyone. But I wanted to share that it was the togetherness of our Okemos community during this time that has helped to get everyone through. I want to thank our crisis teams and our counselors, our social workers and our behavior specialists, our OHS library staff, where we house students for counseling on Friday for their immediate response and their continuous student support. I wanted to thank our administrators and teachers and our staff for reaching out throughout the district to care for each other throughout the day and in coming weeks. Our wolf pack and our handlers had a continuous calming effect on everyone that they come into contact with. And I wanted to share with the board and community that this togetherness really extends beyond our district walls. We've had community members, board members, almost every superintendent in the county that has reached out to offer additional resources, support, whatever might be needed to help us now and in the coming weeks and months. And so it's through that strong and caring relationships that I am assured that we as an Okemos community will get through this. It's been heavy. As we think about the providers that are working with our students, it is National School Psychology Week. And so we know that our school psychologists, their hard work and dedication is really supporting our students' mental health and well-being each day. I just. I was really proud of our Okemos community last Friday when we all came together. And since last week and post-election, while our nation can remain divided, our expectation is to build that togetherness and in our community specifically to embrace the diversity, knowing that that's what makes us stronger. And so in light of some recent events over the past weekend, I want to affirm that Okemos Community Schools is committed to providing safe schools and inclusive environments for everyone. And with that, we're a community that will not allow hateful speech or actions into our buildings, campuses, or communities. And that is aligned with the values that we uphold. I wanted to share, although it seems like it happened a long time ago, the district held a safety and security presentation on October 29th at Kanawha, which was attended by many. Thank you to the trustees that were in attendance. And the presentation is available on our website. And lastly, in today of recognizing and honoring those. This is a tough one, you guys. I wanted to recognize that today is Veterans Day and recognize the service of those veterans who have served our state and our country, protecting and defending our rights. We remain grateful and humbled by their service and sacrifice, and also acknowledging the families and the children of those veterans who exhibit the courage and strength dedicated to keeping us safe. So, a lot of emotions this past week, but could not be prouder of the people in the community.
Thank you for that. That was incredibly difficult. Does anyone have any questions for Assistant Superintendent Bailey? Thank you for that. I'd like to turn it over to our high school students for their report and any requests they may have. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for being here. We know this was a tough week for you guys.
And our first topic is miscellaneous items. As you know, we have just transitioned from going from 2 lunches to 3, and this has been really good for our students because not only are the lines at school shorter, but with our new layout, it's making students more comfortable and they're able to freely move around. The main office is basically finished, so all of the faculty have been moving back into their like original spot. As you may know, there has been a show called Harvey that our theater production has played for us on November 8th and 9th, and that was really successful. And a lot of people have went. We have our annual food drive called Crunch the Hunger, and we've been doing this for 3 years. It's a student-led program from one of our juniors named Lahari, and all of the food gets donated to Greater Lansing Food Bank.
Our next topic is sports. So the fall season sports just ended, and now winter season sports are beginning, with many of them having tryouts like dance, basketball, and cheer, and a few others too. And this year is the first year that Okemos High School is going to have a bowling team, so that'll be out, and people are going to go try out for that. And then we also have the varsity volleyball team seeing a season sadly ended with a loss against Mason, unfortunately. And varsity dance had a competition last weekend. And the next topic, as previously mentioned, junior at OHS passed away, Autumn Robinson. It was tragic, and we're all grieving together. The counseling at OHS, though, has been exceptional. Many students have gone and talked to some of our counselors, and that's been helpful to them and to others around them. There will be a visitation for Auden on tomorrow on 12th at a funeral home from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. And although it was a difficult day, Friday was slightly positive in that people at the high school, the students and teachers we were gathered around in circles and supported each other, tried our best to move through past it. And nobody was alone. So support circle. And then today at school, many Post-it notes were placed on the lockers with positive messages and quotes in order to inspire and encourage people. That's all from us. So do you have any questions?
Thank you for having. You guys can stay or go whenever you like.
Not good at talking when I'm crying. Okay. Up next, we have board reports and requests. I will begin by acknowledging receipt of correspondence since our last meeting. We heard from Ben Eland regarding an interview, Jan Casey regarding Zoom participation, and Jody Noble regarding the recent safety and security forum. Now I will open it up to any board members that may have anything they would like to report or take any questions that they may have. Being none.
I do have a couple things. I know it's a hard time for the district and, very fresh. I just, can't help but, wonder, what's there for us to learn, and I know that that's an ongoing process and just really, wonder what else, we can do besides the supports we would have in place, and, I know we have a behavioral threat assessment process. We have things that are in place that are designed to help prevent these things. Really good work, really good work. And I just, as the adults in the buildings and keep coming back to the wonder. forward to learning more with all of you about that. The Okemos Education Foundation is having its banquet next week. And if you want to go, the last day to buy tickets is the 13th. She has to know the count. So I think this was sent out already to everyone, but if you want to go, make sure you do turn that in.
You know that I have pulled it together a little. Wanted to reference the safety and security presentation from a couple weeks ago. I thought it was excellent, and I know that we couldn't get it recorded. But I would like to recommend that if we have the resources in the future, if we could maybe, we can't redo that presentation because we can't, but it might be worth considering actually recording. I know it's gonna be hard to get Jason, but the presentation, the PowerPoint, it's great, but it just, the dialogue that happened there, which we can't recreate, I understand. But it might be worth thinking about how we might be able to record something between now and, you know, we talked about doing that every year. I highly encourage us to work that into our back to school programming. I thought it was excellent, especially for the first time. And each one will probably get better and better.
I would like to just follow up on that and commend everyone that was a part of that forum, Trustee Kavanaugh and Safety Director Deal and Superintendent Hood, as well as our resident security guy, Jason Russell. Everyone did such a fabulous job. And I know that Director Martinez and Shannon from our communications department, they were all playing a big role in making sure that that night went on smoothly. And parents had a lot of concerns and they were heard, and the panel was excellent at addressing what we're doing and what we're capable of. And I hope that people took as much away from that night as they could, because I know I got a lot out of it. I thought it was very informative and helpful. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who contributed. It was a lot of work, and I know that I appreciate it, and I know the community does as well. So thank you. Okay, do we have anything else? Right, then we will move on to action items. Within the action items, there is a consent agenda. Is there the will of any board member to remove any items from the consent agenda? Seeing none, then I will ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda, please.
Move that the board approve items 1 through 3 for immediate implementation and appropriate action. Item 1, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of October 28th, 2024. Item 2, approval of the minutes of the executive session meeting of October 28th, 2024. And item 3, that the board acknowledge receipt of the October financial statement and approve payment of bills for October. Support.
Moved by trustee Kavanaugh, supported by trustee Phelps. All those in favor respond by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. And the motion passes. Up next, we have a board policy first reading. Can I have a motion, please?
I move that the board waive the reading and adopt first reading of board policies 2406 board officer duties and 2505 board committees.
Moved by trustee Phelps, supported by trustee Kavanaugh. Do we want to have any update from the policy committee regarding either of these?
So this was just a quick change, just because we discussed at our board retreat, the addition of the executive committee as part of our board process. This policy change establishes that, also adds to the duties of the president, that the president is to coordinate with the executive committee on those duties.
Wonderful. All those in favor respond.
Is there a question on it? There's a typo, first of all, in what was that out, I guess that's small, but in the second sentence. So it's a point of clarification. And then I'm just wondering if part of the purpose of the executive committee is to kind of broaden the agenda setting process. And if there is a point person on the executive committee that would receive input from other board trustees who are not on the executive committee, because you don't want to, can't send it to the whole executive committee, other committee violation of OMA. There's just a wondering if policy needs someone designated to receive input from the rest of the board. That was part of the, I think, the spirit of creating the executive committee. So that's a question I had.
I think that would still default to the president. I mean, I could be wrong, but
What I would think too.
yeah,
So we can put that in the board operating procedures as a few things.
Sure. I mean, I don't see why a board member couldn't bring that up at an open meeting as well.
right. Right.
And-
I don't know that there has to be a specific person. It can just be an organic conversation too between board members.
Or, I mean, in theory, I guess it could go to anybody on the executive committee who would then bring it up at the
Meeting.
Sure.
meeting.
Maybe that, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with that. It just was when I read the policy, I didn't see
Right.
that. And then I know that they're maintaining a board calendar. And I thought we talked at a retreat about kind of communicating on some regular basis to changes. So it's just another wondering if we can set up more of an operating procedures level of detail or if it's.
I don't think that's really policy.
I personally would say more operating procedure, just to make, if it should change, maybe a board decides they want to do something different. it's not a policy, but-
It will not be in the copy of the operating procedures. that we receive. I think that's something, that, again, people could interpret differently. It's not in policy.
I guess maybe I'm a little bit confused on what you're asking for to be in policy. Are you asking that we put in policy that if there's changes to the board planning calendar, that's announced to the board?
I was just trying to draw a line between the new policy and the conversation that I remember at the retreat.
Okay.
And part of that was to ensure that we spend our time more intentionally as a board trustees. And so to do that, I thought that was going to be some greater engagement, not just the initial development, which we all see at the beginning of the school year, some kind of ongoing process or conversation that, again, intentionally bring people back together and say, okay, here's how we spend our time. Something that's there. Or do you see that as just in the executive committee? Because that's a question. As again, we're moving into this new structure. So that was one of the questions.
I don't see it as a policy. I mean, I see it maybe as a best practice. Something that you could address that falls under the executive committee, as a best practice, but I don't know that that falls under policy for me. I don't know how the policy committee feels, but
I would be in agreement.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I envision, first off, all you're saying, of course we want a collaborative process.
Right.
Same page with that. What I would say is, in the yellow sheets every week, every 2 weeks, we get a link to the board planning calendar. I think as part of, this is how I envision it. The executive committee will be updating that. That's an organic document. It's not a set in stone thing. It's being changed, right? We're talking about changes right now as it relates to work sessions and things like that. That will change that board planning calendar. So I think that's kind of where I envision those type of discussions to happen as we see, okay, that could happen in board reports during a board meeting. Hey, we made some updates to the board planning calendar. Please take a look at that. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to bring it to us. I guess that's where I kind of see that rather than maybe a hard policy line. More kind of discussion. I mean, that was just kind of my thought.
Operating procedures. Operating procedures are procedures, they're not policies.
I'm comfortable with that, just as it's a new structure we have, and so I'm comfortable with the language in there, and we can, of course, revisit as we need to.
Okay.
I will note, thank you, Trustee Buffett, for bringing up the typo. I did notice that, so we can make sure that that's changed. There's an extra word in there, so.
Okay.
So, thanks.
Thank you. All those in favor of the policies respond by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. And the motion passes. Up next, we have some discussion items. First up is the insulin litigation. And Assistant Superintendent Bailey.
Yes, you
I'm
might.
not used to saying 3 words.
It's a mouthful. As you might remember, Superintendent Hood had mentioned that this would be upcoming, so similar to other lawsuits that we've joined over the past, this is an opportunity that the board, should they elect to join a nationwide lawsuit, and it's specifically against insulin manufacturers, pharmacy benefit managers, that are accused of artificially inflating the insulin prices at the expense of employers and health plan entities. So included in your packet is both the Troon overview of what it is, as well as the other documentation that includes the resolution and agreement. So for discussion today, and then if there is a will to move forward at a future meeting for an action item.
Does anyone have any concerns about this?
I don't.
I don't either.
I have one question, and it's not really about the litigation, other than making sure we know on our calendars if we have to make a motion to take action with the resolution.
It would be the next meeting date. Yep. So if there's a will of the board, then you would see this again at our next November meeting, and we would meet the deadline for submission.
So maybe you can speak to how prevalent, we feel Okemos, or how impacted we feel Okemos is concerning this topic. We have responded to similar types of class actions, but we have had some information about the impact to our community. So perhaps it would be, advantageous for us to have some perspective about the impact to our educational community associated with this topic.
Sure. I don't have that, but I'll definitely follow up and bring that to the next meeting.
Okay, then we will look for this and more information at the next meeting. Up next, we have our board operating procedures, and I will turn it over to that team to help us understand the new updates.
Yeah, so thank you. First off, trustee, thank you for the feedback from the board from the last one, very helpful. As you can see in our kind of our revisions here highlighted in yellow, try to address some of the concerns and discussions that we had. You'll see kind of, we really went over this board vacancy process, and thank you, trustee Lynn, for kind of bringing up those, valid, there was certainly some detail there that we thought was necessary. However, there was also some detail that we thought was unnecessary. So hopefully we kind of polished up that process there to leave us in a good position if and when that does happen. At the same time, we don't want to have steps that are unnecessary there. We also took some feedback from trustee Kavanaugh regarding some continuing education for board members, put a line in there about that. Basically, in order to serve on the executive committee, we say that board members must have taken CPA 101 or MASB or commit to do so within 6 months. We thought that was a reasonable expectation of a member who wanted to serve on that role. And then adding a line about board members communicating with the community, encouraging community members to communicate through official channels. When a lot of times on social media, for example, things kind of have a tendency to flare up, and really our role is to encourage people to communicate through official channels rather than just firing off through social media. Sorry, trustee Buck, I took all the thunder there. Feel free to.
Those were the concerns that were raised, and as we talked about a few minutes ago, some things might need to be polished up and sure. But, so I guess the question for you all is, one, what are the changes that we made in line with kind of what you're thinking and sufficient? And then the second one would be, is there anything else that you think we should be tinkering with as we move forward?
I think it looks good. Yeah.
So it's
That's
efficient
very
waste time.
thorough.
Yeah. So I think the goal is to have this at a board meeting when Superintendent Hood is back, because he was part of the planning of this all along as well. And so again, based on my comment about the executive committee, I'd like to put a little language in there about the intention and spirit of that work. But I think we would have this on the agenda next time as well. And again, we'll use the same strategy of highlighting anything that we change from this current document. So you don't have to read the whole thing. It'll be formatted in the same way.
Yeah, then the first meeting in December was our intended
First
adoption
meeting.
date. So, yeah, so.
Okay. Thank you so much for all that work. Next up, we have our board book study that I will turn over to trustee Taylor because we did not have the opportunity to have this discussion at our last meeting. So take it away.
So, the questions that I had posed were pretty deep and reflective, and it was my goal not to have everybody, of course, we're not going to dissect each one of them, but I was hoping to give a flare of questions that you might pick out a couple that may have spoken to you, that we could discuss. And, one of the things that really struck me in this chapter was this book is 30 years old, and I felt like they could have written it about today. So as I was reading through it, I was like, wow, this is actually timely and feels very current, which before this, the chapters, the previous chapters, I didn't quite necessarily feel like it was that timely. And it's a little less academic now. And I'll kick it off with the questions that really struck me. And I think mostly in part because for me personally, leadership is very important. And I myself strive to be a leader. And so understanding what it takes to be a leader and how you lead people from different places. It really struck me, and balancing tradition with innovation and managing expectations. And I guess I would be really interested to hear what, from your perspectives, the themes in this particular chapter that really spoke to you. For me, it was, like I said, it was really how you lead people from different places. And some of the examples that he gave, the difference between followership. I pretty much had to stop myself from underlining every sentence. And transformational leaders induce followers to pursue goals that represent the values and the motivations, the wants and the needs, the aspirations and expectations of both leaders and followers. The followership really, really spoke to me. So that was a huge takeaway for me in this chapter. I don't want to blindfold anybody, so don't all speak at once.
No, just along those leadership lines, one thing kind of along what you said there, just how, being a leader, the whole notion of situational leadership as well, and how having a flexible sense of what leadership can be and how what leadership might have to change depending on your constituency, how you're a leader to those individuals. That's the same then as it is now as well.
I appreciated the bit about the difference between leadership and management, because I think that gets lost a lot. And I think as board members, that's something that we really, really have to pay attention to, because it's that, we're the what, not the how. And I think that leadership is the what and management is the how. And I think a lot of people try to do both, and it gets cloudy when you do both. And I think that being a leader, has so many, aspects of it that involve inspiring people. And, management is making sure that things are getting done properly. And I think that in our role, we only have to worry about one person. So being inspiring leaders is, very motivational as a board member and very impactful to a community if we do it right. And I think that that's just something that really spoke to me in our role, because we are here to lead and to inspire and to strategize and to, create the what. And I think that that really does, help me maintain focus as to what my roles are, what my lane is, and what my goals are supposed to be as a board member, so that I can have that, appropriate outlook and impact. I think that that's really important.
It's easy. Like when I was reading through this chapter, the management versus leadership definitely spoke to me too. Because it's really easy to get caught up in that. It's really easy to get caught up in just the day-to-day and lose sight of the vision and the strategy. I mean, even outside of the board table with even my own, like I was reading this too from a professional standpoint and leading my team in my professional career, and how easy it is for me to get stuck in that day-to-day in the how. And then time goes by and I realize I haven't done much reading and I've lost sight of that vision and I've lost sight of the strategy. And then I have to rally myself back out of the management and back into driving the ship, so to speak, in a more strategic direction. And so that also made me think of, how do we do that for our superintendent? Like, how do we make sure that we're keeping him, like, he also has to differentiate between the what and the how. And how do we help him do that? Really interesting. I don't know if it's easy, but just because of the last, 4 years that we've come through. And there was a portion of this that was talking about building a culture of adaptability. And how you do that. And knowing all the adapting that we've had to do. And I'm gonna relate it back to the start times. And some of the start times conversations that we've had. And I remember you and I were sitting next to each other in one of our meetings when we were talking about it, and you had said, we've already had so much change, and I don't know if staff can take any more change. And as I was reading this, I kept thinking back to that moment, because you were leading in that moment, right? Like you were thinking of the changes that we've come through and what a start time change might do, even though we all know I am definitely pro start time change and I was driving for it pretty hard. But when I was reading this chapter, I actually thought of that. Like it's that moment in my brain. I remember exactly where we were sitting. That really resonated. So I just wondered if reading this, like I would love your perspective on building a culture of adaptability.
Yeah, so I think I read this 10 years ago. So this is my second go around with this book. And every time I read it, I get out different little nuggets each time. I think when we're thinking about that culture of adaptability, it's normally not that you set out to build that necessarily, but you're building it along the way. And so when we talk about the process, the outcome is that we want that, but it's how do we respond? How are we flexible? When it talks about having, you need that followership. How are you attuned to what their needs are? How are you kind of as you're leading, knowing when do we have the wherewithal to go faster, to try something new, to do something a little bit bigger? When do we have that moment where we kind of need to pause a little bit? And pausing isn't bad, because we might need to just kind of enhance and move forward in that step. So I think of it as my green lights and red lights, and thinking about, as a leader, how are you thinking about the team and the organization as a whole to know what we're ready to do next. If that makes sense.
One of the things that I also keep asking in the back of my mind is, how do you know? And I don't know if I've yet to read it yet in these pages, but how do you know when it's time? Even if you have some resistance, to put on the gas. Like, I'm still wondering if these.
When you get to part 3,
if that's-
innovation,
that's in
sneak
here.
peek, it's coming.
That's what I keep thinking, like, this is great and it's really. But there is that, but at some point in time, as a leader, you have to make the decision, I'm gonna push the gas. And I'm going to bring my people along with me. Like, how do you know that's the time, even if they're not quite ready? I don't know, I'm waiting.
In this chapter, it talks about how when you're building for leadership, that common values and that vision, and it's built together. And so it's not built in isolation. And so it's really that commonality of, it's a common vision. It's not the vision of one, it's not just the leader. And the development of that common vision, so that everyone does feel that they're part of it. They are excited and motivated and wanting to do part to move that forward. And so it's really the starting with that commonality versus trying to impart something.
Force the change.
I think as we start to plan a new strategic planning process, right?
Yeah.
That sentiment will be so important as we go forward. The balance of that also, though, it's like you want to be collaborative and inclusive, right? That's a value that we share. And what we wind up with also needs to serve the purpose of us being strategic. And to me, that there's just this chapter talks about paradoxes, and that's another, not a paradox, but sometimes those things are intention, right? The more people you include, sometimes the bigger the language, you get people on board, but then the less it actually needs to practice. It's not traction. So just, I think those things can be intention, and that's part of why I'm excited about our planning process and the rest of it.
From a tactical standpoint, I think, something that you often talk about, trustee Buffett, about how do we know when we need to identify things to stop doing. So I think as you're going through the process, or even through the journey of identifying, this is where we really want to be, do we even have the capacity to get there with what we're doing? And there is that paradox, and there is that tension, and there is the opportunity to address that tension with some different ideas about how might we get there, given all these things that we need to do, as opposed to that that we should be doing, as opposed to what we are doing. And that, I think, when people recognize that you are appreciating that rub, if you will, and the challenge of being able to get there, and what it really takes and the impact on them, that they're seen, I think that matters. And I usually don't speak from a tactical standpoint, but that just resonated for me in terms of a practical application of addressing, we do know that we want to get somewhere where we're not necessarily currently experiencing. So how might we rally the effort, appreciate the value of getting there, and tactically how we could actually make that work, because that makes a difference.
Yes.
It does.
And I would just underscore, I think, what you started with, which is that, and you also, like, what do we stop doing? Right? 'Cause we know if it's just, building on top of what we have, then that's not the way there, right? I mean, we can build things, but we have to also get out our bleach and wipe away the congealed residue of the things that have done before. And that, and which is not, that's not the baby in bathwater, right? That's a strategic conversation.
We hear you, trustee
Sorry.
Buffett. We've heard you. That's really good.
Anything else you wanted to talk about, trustee Taylor? Well, thank you for your questions. They were very thoughtful.
Are you up next on next step?
I am. Step 9.
Okay.
Good job with the.
This is the second opportunity of the meeting where we can have citizens address the board regarding any items of interest. Secretary Phelps, do we have any blue cards?
We do not.
We do not. And do we know if we have any online speakers? We do not. Okay, then there are no other matters, which means we are adjourned at 8:38. Thank you, everyone.